All right. I did want to apologize real quick, because of the angle. I did want to show up on video, but where I'm at, it's dark right now, so unfortunately, it didn't work out. But hey, it's the message that counts, right? But anyway, I wanted to talk about this subject, right? A fascinating subject matter. Going back over the teenage myth thing, which does come in around here, who clicked on this video. You probably heard me speak about this subject before. I do have a playlist, on my channel about the very subject. You can check it out. You can find it in the playlist section. All right, but I just wanted to give a couple more, thoughts on the subject matter. Um, one thing I wanted to speak about was, the child labor laws. Let's start off with that. Um, the child labor laws, if you do the research on them, they were created, um, to keep children out of the factories, right? To keep the children out of the factories because back then, the establishments, it could often be, a dangerous, workplace, for the children to work. Hell, let alone the adults as well. You know what I'm saying? So that's what it was. So what they did to protect the children from, the unsafe, work conditions, they decided to come up with something called the child labor laws, which restricted the children from working, in those factories, right? And also restricted, how old they had to be in order to work. So, with that being said, with that history understood about what it, why it was created and what its purpose is, with that being said, today in the 21st century, these child labor laws are truly not needed today. Now, what do I mean by this? It's very simple because today in the 21st century, um, establishments, wherever that might be, they have to abide by governmental restrictions, right? And they have to pass, certain regulations and, tests, they have to abide by, to make sure the workplace is safe for their workers, right? So the fact that in the modern world, right, the modern industrialized world, all workplaces have to go by a code, meaning what? You have to pass certain inspections, such as the ones where you got to make sure that your workplace is a safe environment for your workers. So, again, with that factor being said, the child labor laws don't make any sense in the modern world because the reason they were created was to keep children out of the dangerous working environments. But now today, since workplaces have to abide by certain rules and regulations, to protect their workers, the child labor laws don't make any sense in the modern world just because of that factor. Like it defeats the whole purpose of why they were even created in the first place. Now, I wanted to give a little story real quick, um, about when I got my first job. Right when I was um when I was 16, I got my first job. But here's the story behind it. Right, where I got my job at, they were actually, it was a small community, right? They were looking for two people to hire to help around, with certain things they needed done around the community, right? So they were looking for, maybe some high school age to, college age, people, that they could hire, a few times, a week to come in and whatnot. So they saw me, they offered me a job, right? But my other friend there, again, I was 16, he was 14, right? They also wanted to hire him as well to work there, right? So he was excited about that. But then the part where they had to decline him was, when they found out he was 14, right? So again, they wanted to hire him, to work for them, but the only reason they couldn't do it was because he was 14 and he had to be 16 in order to, have a job there. So he was upset about that. He was depressed about it, because they were willing to hire him to do the job and he was excited about it. He wanted to, work, to make some of his own money and whatnot, but then he got denied. Why did he get denied? Simply because he was 2 years under the legal working age. So the reason I'm bringing this up is to say that if somebody can prove that they are capable of handling the responsibility of whatever the activity is, whether that be working, whether that be um smoking, right? Why should that person be restricted from that activity if they can prove and demonstrate that they are mature enough to take on that responsibility? And that's gonna sideway into a whole nother subject matter. Um, Say for an example, right? I think I came out with the what's the word I'm looking for? With a very good, very fair, and very reasonable way to fix the problem, that we have today with teens, because a lot of them, are actually mature enough and would actually like to be what's the word I'm looking for? Emancipated, as the saying goes, right? Be emancipated, and be able to do their own, and rightfully so. That just makes sense. Why? Because a teen is actually just a young adult. They're not kids, they're not children, they're actually young adults. But this society we live in, they've convinced everybody that these human beings right, they hit puberty so they can have children, but they are also children themselves, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Hell, and even these religious organizations, they believe that nonsense too, but we might comment on that, a little bit later. But my idea that I came up with, and again, this is very logical and very reasonable. And I even have a chapter in my book, right, the teenage myth, which I'm working on that. Right, I'm still working on the book. But I even focus on this in the book, and the idea is it's called an ID of emancipation, is what my concept is. And here's the little breakdown. What I'm thinking is, because it's true that you might have some teens who, due to the, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, what's the word that Robert Epstein uses in his book? Oh, infantilization, right? Isn't it infantilization, I believe, the word he used? Um, Basically meaning what? When they should have been, learning adult skills, instead of, teaching them that, we infantilize them, to try to keep them in a childlike mentality as long as possible, right? That's what this society, does. They don't want you to grow up. They want to keep you in a childlike mentality as long as possible. That's the whole, um, agenda that they have, right? They don't want you to grow up and, be responsible. They don't want that. They want to keep you in a child mentality as long as possible. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, is the idea behind the idea of emancipation is is this: because you might have somebody who say, yeah, well, some teens, might actually be responsible and ready to, move on to adulthood. But what about the teens who are also, due to infantilization, they might not yet be ready for another, year or two. So what about them? If we were to just accept every person who's 14 years old as an adult, well, what about those who are, still childish in their mentality, because of the over-fantilization, right? So again, some of them might be ready, but what about those who are not ready? It doesn't make sense to just push all of them, into the adult world. Well, here's a very reasonable answer for this. With the idea of emancipation, what this is the society can come together and come up with a test, that this test will test the individual about every aspect of life, right? Every aspect of adult life, right? Everything, from I mean, shit, well, all, everyday adult life, if that makes sense, if you get what I'm saying. And if this individual can pass the test, that will prove that this person is ready for adulthood if they can pass this government administered test. And if they can pass the test, they'll be given an ID of emancipation. Now, what does this ID mean? This ID means that they'll be able to, say, for an example, purchase certain items that otherwise they would not be able to purchase if they did not have this ID. So, with this, we now have a system in place where we can make sure the young people of any age who are claimed to be, ready and, want to move on from childhood into adulthood, they'll have a chance to prove that they are mature enough to the society, and then they'll be given an opportunity to be emancipated by being given this ID of emancipation. Basically, it's their permission, right, from the government. It's like, okay, now you're viewed as an adult, right? So with this ID, now you can do adult things. Right now, you'll be able to do adult things, and you'll be responsible for it. So here is the benefit of this. One, the teens who are ready to move on to adulthood, they'll be allowed to, right? And the society will accept it, right, with wide open arms and accept these people into adult life. However, the teens that, due to infantilization, might need, another year or two or whatever, still with their parents, those people, they'll be, they'll still be in that, that teen world, right? They'll still be considered by the society as dependents. But then on the other hand, as I said, those who are ready and can prove it, they're, ready to move on to adulthood, they'll be given that idea of emancipation, which basically shows and demonstrates to society that this person is now an adult. They're no longer a child. So again, I think my idea, right, this idea of emancipation, I think this is a very logical and very reasonable, um, aspect to look at it, right? This gives a very satisfying response to that question, that I made, a few minutes ago. If somebody said, well, yeah, some teens, might be ready, but what about those who are not ready? We shouldn't just push all of them, into the adult world. Well, this ID, this will make sure those who still need time, to, um, to grow and learn, before entering adulthood, they'll have time to do that. But those who can demonstrate that they are ready now, they'll be given a chance to move on. And again, any person of any age can take this test. Any person of any age can take this test, because this test is, again, it's a society comes together, right, and the government can give this out to anybody who is looking to be emancipated and no longer be subject to their parents legally. They can take this test, and if they can pass this government administered test, they'll be granted an ID of emancipation. So basically, with the ID of emancipation, as I said, they'll be able to do any activity that otherwise they would be restricted, right? They'll be able to purchase alcohol products, tobacco products, um, buy restricted, um, anything that's restricted, right, that you otherwise would not be able to do, without your, ID to prove that you're an adult. So again, I think that my concept is a very logical and very reasonable concept, right? Like, say, for an example, there's no reason why a human who's 15 or 16 years old, if there's no reason that person should be trapped in, living with their parents, and be treated like a child. If they can prove to the society that they are ready to move on to adulthood, they should be welcomed with wide open arms. Because in every way, shape, and form, that person is actually an adult. The only way they're not is what society says, right? Legally. Because anything that's legal or illegal is simply a concept that society comes together and makes up. So anything legal or illegal is not something backed by facts, evidence, or reasoning, but rather it's something that society as a whole comes together and agrees upon. Just like the age of consent laws, right? Or the age of majority. That's just something that society came together and agreed. If you're 18, you're an adult. If you're 17, you're not an adult. Again, that's not something that's backed by science, logic, or evidence, but rather that's just something that society came together and agreed upon. And again, it just morally doesn't make any sense. If these humans, can prove it, they are capable and ready, for adulthood, they shouldn't be, trapped in childhood. They should have an opportunity where they're able to move on into adulthood. And again, unlike most people, I actually speak from my own firsthand experience. I could prove that I was very responsible and very mature, when I was, say, 15, 16 years old. And hell, I would have loved to have been given the opportunity to enter into adulthood. And there's no logical reason why I should have been held back for, a couple more years. There's no logical reasoning behind that other than it's just legality. In other words, it's just something that somebody made up just for the hell of it. It's very simple to understand. Because again, going back to my statement about, how a person who's 15 or 16 years old, you know, in every way, shape, and form, that human is actually a biological adult. It's just not legally. Now, one will ask, well, how is a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old an adult? It's very simple. I mean, they look like adults, right? They act like adults, a lot of them. They can have children. Remember that these people can have children. So for one, you got to think, it's like, well, wait a second. If a human can have another human, that means that that human that can give birth to another human, they can be a parent to a child. So it doesn't make sense how a child could have a child of their own. That doesn't make any sense. Hell, whatever you believe in, a God or, evolution, no matter what one of those standpoints you believe in, it still wouldn't make any logical sense. Why would a God create, um, humans, as children with the ability to give birth to children? Or same on the evolution side. It's why would natural selection, right, the process of evolution, why would it make it to where humans sexually mature at 12, 13, 14 years old and are then at that time capable of having offspring and carrying on the species? It's like, why would that happen? It just doesn't make any sense. And going back to the God perspective, which, me, of course, I believe in intelligent design, right? I believe in the Holy Scriptures. And the Bible also backs up what I'm saying, because in the Holy Bible, there's, there's no type of concept of a teen or an adolescent, because if you do the research on it, um, the time period called adolescence or teens, that was invented in the early 1900s by a man named, what is this guy? Granville Stanley Hall? G. Stanley Hall. Look him up on Wikipedia if you want to learn about him. All right, this is the person that came up with this whole idea of, there's something wrong with, the adolescent brain, so, he came up with a whole, theory on it. In fact, he had a book. What was his book called? Which actually, it's a damn long title. But if you go on Google, just look up G. Stanley Hall, a 1904 book, Adolescence, and you'll find his book. I'm not going to quote the whole thing because it's like 20 words, really damn long. But just look up the term I said, and you'll find his book easy on Google or Wikipedia. But that's the person that came up with that whole theory. So again, It's a relatively new concept that only existed for the last 100 years. So and then you got to think about it. It's like, wait a second. Well, if human beings have existed on Earth for thousands of years, again, everybody has their own belief as to how long that is. Some say, a couple 100,000. Of course, the religious side, a few thousand. Regardless of what one, you believe in, it's like you got to think about this real quick. It's like, wait a second. If humans have existed, on the Earth for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but this concept of a teen, right, or an adolescent, if that only existed for roughly 100 and some years, that means literally for 99% of human history, that concept did not exist. You know what did exist though? For 99% of human history, right, all cultures and, groups around the world, they believed that, a human, you know, um, a child would be a child up until that child hit sexual maturity. Then they would be considered to be part of the adult population. And that's just how it always was. Every civilization throughout history has that in common. That was just something that was known. And it also, marry off young. Hell, even here in the United States, all you got to do is go back roughly 90 to 100 years and they were still going by that as well. So again, this whole thing about waiting till hell today, it's not just even wait until you're 18 to get married. Hell, people today, man, are waiting until they're like what 20, 27, 30 years old, if not older than that, to get married, for the first time. It's like, damn, that's crazy. But hell, 90, 100 years ago, girls even here in America, which is Babylon the Great in the Bible, but that's another topic for another time. They were marrying off young, and why? That's just something that was normal, right? That was just something that's considered to be normal, and it always has been up until the early 1900s. Because that's when these new ideas, were brought in. These new ideas about, say, for an example, right? If you do the research on where, this whole idea of, you become an adult at 18, again, it's not backed by science, logic, or reasoning, but rather the only reason why people believe it is that's the law. Meaning what? A group of people came together, they agreed on this, so that's why they believe it. Right? Again, it's not has nothing to do with facts, reasoning, or proof. Somebody just said, "Well, that's the law," and you believe it, or you're wrong. It's like, okay. It's like, but the ironic part is like, well, wait. Even in America, at one point, it was the law that you could have slaves. So it's like, so do you believe in that too? Because the law says that you were allowed to have slaves. Do you now believe that that's right because that's the law? So again, anything that's legal or illegal, it's simply a belief that society came together and believed in, made up and all believe in. It's very simple. It's not something backed by fact, reasoning, or proof, just a belief that society as a whole comes together and agrees upon. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, if you did a research on where 18 came from, based on my research, it has to go back to, the First World War. What happened was they put the age for, to you to be taken to war, for you to be added in the army, or constrict, what's the word I'm looking for? Drafted would be the correct word. You'd had to be 21. But then, as they needed more soldiers, they decided to drop the age down to 18 so they could get more people, among their ranks. And basically, from that point on, 18, basically stayed as, the age of maturity. At least that's the information that I have on it as to the origin of that. But but yeah, again, it's not backed by science, reasoning, or proof that you're an adult at 18. It's just something that society came together and agreed upon. Um, let's see. Let's even comment on this real quick. I was having a conversation the other day with a person, and this is somebody I know, back from middle school, right? We've known each other for a long while. And they were talking about joining the army, but they mentioned something that, got me thinking. They were like, yeah, so I'm old enough, to join the army, but, I'm not old enough to, drink alcohol or, even purchase, tobacco products because, you know, what is it, 3, 4 years ago in the United States, you just had to be 18 to purchase, tobacco products, but now you got to be 21, and as well with, alcoholic products as well. It's like, wait a second, what? So you can go to war and fight for your country at 18, but that 18-year-old can't buy tobacco or, drink alcohol. Doesn't make sense. And you know what the most ironic part is? Everybody will agree on that. That, yeah, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. We should let, our boys, drink alcohol, if they can go and fight for our country. Everybody will all be, up in arms about that, right? Everybody will, come at the government, for that restriction. It's like, how can you restrict, these young adults from, smoking cigarettes or, drinking alcohol? If they can fight for our country and die for our country, they should be allowed to do that too. And again, an 18-year-old absolutely should be able to buy alcohol and drink, excuse me, drink alcohol, right? Purchase the alcohol and cigarettes as well. Obviously, right? If you can go to war and die for the country, you have every right to purchase those things after you're an adult, right? But here's the kicker, though, and I've never saw any person think about this part before. This is the kicker. Everybody, and this is ironic because I looked on YouTube the other day and I saw there was a poll that somebody put up, and it was about, well, what is the age that it's okay to start driving? And a couple options was, 16, um, 18, 20, or 21. And by a landslide, like 70% of people picked 16 as the age that it's okay to drive, right? So here's the kicker. The reason I'm bringing this up is like, so everybody can accept that it's okay to drive at 16, but that same 16-year-old is somehow not responsible enough to, say, for an example, to drink alcohol, to smoke cigarettes, or play a lottery game, right? To buy scratch off tickets. Somehow, this 16-year-old who can drive a vehicle around, a vehicle capable of mowing down 10 people in a matter of seconds, that person's mature enough to drive around a vehicle that can mow down 10 people in a matter of seconds. But somehow that individual is now not mature enough and responsible enough to buy cigarettes, to play lottery scratch offs, or, buy alcoholic beverages. That doesn't make any logical sense. And hell, let me say this. I know when I was, 15, 16, if I got my hands on alcohol, I was very responsible with it, right? I'm very responsible, never over drink, never, be irresponsible with it. Same thing with the lottery, right? Play a lottery card, here or there. Very responsible with it. Same thing with smoking, which I haven't I'm not big into that. I've have had, a couple cigarettes myself before, but nothing I've never, really got much into. It doesn't really interest me, if that makes sense. Though I will say I can understand, how somebody could get addicted to it. But I have a friend who smoked cigarettes, but she did it very responsibly. Okay? So the reason I'm bringing all this up to say is everybody will be in all an uproar if we restrict 18-year-olds from buying alcohol or buying tobacco products. Right? Everybody's up in arms against the government about that. Which again, that doesn't make sense in itself whatsoever, of course. But then nobody will ever talk about how they let 16-year-olds, right, as they call them, children, which are not children or actually young adults. But these immature children, as they call them, they'll let these people drive around machines that are capable of killing huh, literally crowds of people, right? Literally, capable of mowing down crowds of people with these machines. So these children are capable of driving around in hunks of metal that can take multiple people's lives in a matter of seconds. But somehow those same people are now not mature enough to buy scratch off tickets, smoke cigarettes, or responsibly, um, drink alcohol. Hell, they don't even let them vote. So again, it's like, what logic does that make sense? It's like, what logic is there behind that? And you bring this up to somebody, and they don't even know. They probably even never thought about something like that before. So once again, it just shows the hypocrisy with this belief. And let's even touch on the age of consent topic real quick. Because throughout the 50 states, the age of consent ranges from 16 years old to 18 years old in the United States of America, right? So, let's. Oh, and here's another thing on the age of consent, right? If you do the research around the world, right? Because there's about, what is it, 195 countries that exist on Earth. You can look it up. There is about 195 countries that exist in the world today. Well, I guess 194, if Russia, takes over Ukraine, but that's a different subject for another time. Um, but among all these countries, right, the age of consent ranges, the lowest age of consent in the world is 11 years old, and the highest age of consent in the world is 21 years old. Now, my question is, what one of those is the correct number? Because something can't be moral on one side of a line, but if you walk to the other side of the line, that same thing now must be immoral because, say, for an example, if you're on one side of a line, you're in Pennsylvania, but on the other side of the line, you walk over to New Jersey. Now, let's just give a hypothetical. Let's just give a hypothetical. Let's say um, Pennsylvania's age of consent is 17 and New Jersey's age of consent is 16, right? So let's say there's a bridge that goes over the border between the two um, states, right? So on one side of the bridge in Pennsylvania, you can have sex legally at 17. But if you walk across the bridge to New Jersey, you can now legally have sex at 16. So again, it shows that the morality somehow changes if you cross a magic line. And that shows the stupidity and the illogical fallacy behind the belief that somehow morality changes based on where you are walking in the world. Right? If you, say for an example, there's certain countries in the world, or as Larkin Rose will call them, crunchies. There's some countries in the world where the age of maturity is 21 years old. So, say for an example, here in America, you're considered an adult at 18. So you get on an airplane right when you're 18 and fly to that country where the age of consent and, being an adult is 21. So now you get off in that country and now you're legally not an adult anymore. Right now you're legally a child. How does that make any sense? So when you got on the plane, you went on the plane as an adult, but when you came off in this other country, now you're a child. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. So again, it just shows the hypocrisy and the self-contradictory behind these beliefs. An age of consent is a crime against humanity to tell human beings, to restrict natural human behavior. That's just a crime against humanity. Because how do we put an age limit on something that's just biological and natural? It doesn't make any sense. Now, just to give a disclaimer, I'm not sitting here, telling anybody to go around, and sleep with anybody under the legal age of consent in the state you live in. I've never said that. I'm simply just saying, I'm just simply exposing the hypocrisy behind the laws that these countries set up. That's all I'm doing, just to give a disclaimer. I never said, to go and disobey the law of the land. I'm simply showing the pure hypocrisy and self contradictory with the law of the land. That's all I'm simply doing. So, once again, setting age of consent laws, that's a crime against humanity, is what it is. To try to restrict human biology and natural, human feelings. Hell, say for an example, it's a fact that animals get depressed if say for an example, if you, restrict them from their sexual feelings, right? Say for an example, if you take we'll just pick something. If you take, say, a male cat, right, and separate it by itself away from female cats and really any other cat in general, it's gonna get depressed. Why? Because the animal has sexual feelings it wants to enact on. So same way with humans. After all, don't they say that we're animals too, according to the theory of evolution? Aren't we just evolved animals, according to them? So if every animal on the face of the earth, once that animal becomes sexually mature, they start engaging in sexual intercourse. So why would it not be the same for humans? If humans, after all, according to the theory of evolution, we're just evolved animals ourselves. So if every other species of animal on the face of the earth, once they hit sexual maturity, they begin to reproduce. So why is it not the same for humans? Doesn't make sense. And this is why there's such a high rate, as they call it, teen pregnancy. Why? Because humans, it's just natural for humans when they hit sexual maturity to start engaging in sexual intercourse. That's just what's logical and natural. Now, we might not like that, right? That, might not be something, you feel happy about talking about, or thinking about that. But to pretend that it's not true is just hypocrisy, because it is true. And this is the reason. Let me say this: if God did not intend for, as people call adolescents, to engage in sexual intercourse, why would God give these humans sexual feelings? After all, isn't sexual sin a very great sin in the Bible? And another thing as well, if you go to, what is that scripture? 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 9, it says it's better to marry than it is to burn. Right? It's better to marry than to burn. What it's talking about is it's talking about burning with sexual desire, is what the context of the verse is talking about. Right? So why is it that if God did not intend for, as they call them, boys and girls, but they're actually young men and young women, so-called adolescents, if God, right, the creator of the human body, if he did not intend for humans to start engaging in sexual intercourse when they're young, why would he set their bodies up to start having these sexual feelings? And not only the sexual feelings, but he set up their bodies to start, the sexual organs to start working, right? Girls start getting their menstrual cycle, right, around 12, 14 years old, right? Boys, start to develop, their pubic hair, and then, they're able to, reproduce as well, right? Around the same time that girls are able to. So again, if God did not intend for that to happen for a reason, why would it be happening? It's like you'd have to claim that God made a mistake, which is just not true. Because people will say that, it's 20, right? It's 20 years old. A lot of guys will claim that you're not a man till you're 20 according to the Bible, which is just not true. They go to Numbers chapter 1 verse 18, where it speaks about, those who are 20 years old and upwards, those are the ones, that you got to take to war with you. They'll use that to say, oh, well, see, that means that, you're not a man till you're 20. Otherwise, you would have been, added into the army before you were 20. Now, on face value, that conclusion could be logical. However, once you start to go deeper, you find out that is a misunderstanding of the Bible. Say, for an example, if you're going to use that to say you're not a man till you're 20 because it restricts you from military service, well, that's cut, because if you go to Numbers, the 8th chapter, it it restricts you from working in the priesthood until you're 25. Does that now mean that those men who are 24 or 23, are they now not men because they are restricted from working in the priesthood? No. Those restrictions are simply set up because you needed to have a certain level of experience to take on both of those positions. You needed a experienced warrior to be sent to the front lines, not an unexperienced person that recently just became a man. They're gonna get their ass steamrolled, right? They're gonna get cut down real quick. You want to give them the years to get some experience. You don't want to send those guys to the front lines. They'll get a that'll be a wasted life right there. And the same thing with the priesthood. That was a very serious thing. If you went in there and you made a mistake with the priesthood, that's your ass right there. You get put to death for making a mistake. So you had to be very, you'd had to know what the hell you're doing when you take on that experience, or excuse me, take on that office. You had to have a ton of experience. So again, does that mean that you're not a man till you're 25 because the Bible restricts you from working in the priesthood till you're 25? No. It was simply because you needed a certain level of experience to take on that position. It has nothing to do with you being a man or not being a man. It's just an illogical fallacy to, claim that. So, whichever is more I could speak on, but I think it's, simple and to the point. Okay, just hit on, a couple of those, subject matters, dealing with, the teen myth thing. And again, this isn't the first video, we spoke about this, or I should say I spoke about this, many times before, in the past. Okay, again, you can check out my playlist on the subject if you want to learn more about it. I also would recommend you check out a book named Teen 2.0 by Robert Epstein. Right, it's a book going over, some of the subject matters that I spoke about here. Again, look it up on Amazon. Teen 2.0 by Robert Epstein. I read his book, very good book. He makes some very compelling arguments, for why, as people call adolescents, actually, just young adults are not actually children. It goes into the history behind it. He also explains, which he's a Harvard trained psychologist, right? So he has, a ton of experience dealing with this, So some of the things that they did, is they wanted to find out the, what's the word I'm looking for? Competency, I believe is the word, right? They wanted to test, teens and adults, to see what one of them are more competent, about, everyday life skills, right? So they put teens up against adults ranging from, 18 to all the way up to like 90 years old. And, they had both of their groups sit down and do this test. And the test was basically about everyday life skills, of being an adult. And some of the cases, the teens actually outscored the adults. But on average, the teens would score just slightly under the average adult. But many times the teens actually outscored the adults. And you can find out some of this information. I believe one of his websites you can look up is called howadultareyou.com. Look that up, howadultareyou.com. Website, you can look that up. Um, it's all some fascinating information, to look into in your free time. I'd highly recommend checking that book out. Um, let me see. One other thing that I wanted to comment on is I was thinking back to when I made the statement about, how the teens basically are adults in every way. And I wanted to add into that, when I was 15 or 16, most people, viewed me as being an adult as well. When they passed by me, whether it be in a store, out in public somewhere, they'd also, perceive that I was an adult when I was 15 or 16. How do I know that? On many occasions when I was with my younger brother, out in public with him somewhere, people would be like, oh, your son's cute, or hell, this one time I was at a I believe it was a concert or something, that my brother was a part of, um, and the director was sitting by me, and he was asking me, oh, well, what one of the kids are yours, so it's like, if they thought that I was a kid, they wouldn't ask me that. Obviously, they look at me and they see a fully grown, mature adult, right? But again, I was 15 or 16. So see, so it goes back to what I'm saying, that oh, and another thing as well, right, about a lot of times, teens try to sneak into, these nightclubs and whatnot. And it's like, well, why are they trying to do that? Why the hell are they trying to do that? Why? Because they're showing that these people, that they are independent adults, right? They're trying to do adult things. Why? Because they are adults themselves. So they're trying to demonstrate that by going and doing these adult like things. If they were children, they wouldn't be trying to do these things. So since society doesn't accept that these are actually adults, they have to, like, sneak around, get fake IDs, to go out and do these things. Otherwise, if we did as a society come together and just accept the facts, that these people, are just young adults, you know. But of course, with that, there also comes responsibility, right? And a lot of them are ready and are capable of taking on that responsibility, right? So what I'm saying, going back to the emancipation thing, with that responsibility, or excuse me, with that freedom that comes along with that, there's also that adult responsibility that comes along with that emancipation. Say, for example, you commit a crime, hey, you're going to be held responsible for your crime, right? Um, Hell, if want to go out and, and do certain things on your own, hey, you're going to be responsible for that, right? So again, basically, it's letting these children, right? Well, as society would view as children, because they're actually not biologically children, they're actually biological adults, but as what society would call children, right? It's giving them a chance to move on into adulthood early if they can demonstrate they are responsible enough and capable of moving on. Say, for an example, again, there's no logical reason, or why a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, 17-year-old, if they can prove that they are responsible and are capable of being an adult, there is no logical, moral objection anybody can come up to, or I should say come up with, to object to that person after proving they are responsible and capable of handling adult life. There is no logical, moral um, statement anybody could make as to why that human should be held back if they can demonstrate by fulfilling that government administered test, that demonstrates they are capable of moving on. And not only are they capable, but they have a desire to move on. Otherwise, they would not have went and taken the test to begin with. Right? If they wanted to, remain, as a child, they would have never went to take the test, to be emancipated in the first place. So obviously, they want that emancipation, right? So again, if they can pass the test, then they'll be given that ID of emancipation, and be welcomed, into the adult world. However, let's say, for an example, if one takes the test, and they fail the test, right? Say they get some right, but they get majority wrong. Hey, well, that person will not be given an idea of emancipation, and that person will still remain under the authority of their mother and father. Why? Even though biologically that person's technically an adult, you know, um, they didn't pass the test, so they'll still be held, legally under the, um, you know, control of their father and mother, if you get what I'm saying. Now, again, I do understand, I want to make this clear as well, is of course I understand that, biologically, teens are adults and, adolescence doesn't exist. But with that being said, the recovery process, back to how the world was 200 years ago, 300 years ago, where a child, as soon as that child hits puberty, now that child's part of the adult population, right? We can get to that point again in the future, right? We got to, hell, and even Robert Epstein speaks about this in his book, Teen 2.0. There's a chapter in there about how the world must change. There are some changes that has to be done, such as, instead of all the, the games and shit that kids are out here doing today, hey, they gotta, we gotta, teach these kids about, being an adult, because how things were done not too long ago in the past, girls, they were taught, how to, be women, right? How to be mothers, how to, clean, take up the household, and do all that. Men were taught, manly things, how to work, how to, take care of your family, right? And whatever, jobs that they were, going to do when they get older, they were taught those things very young, right? Like, say, for an example, with girls, in ancient world, they'd start at like 5 years old, start training them, on how to do these womanly things, so if you start off young like that, hell, in 5, 6, 7 years, they're going to be ready to, take on that responsibility, right? So children were trained up differently back then, so we as a society, got to go back, to do that, right? So what I'm saying is that this is like a gradual step, right? This is like a very logical, very reasonable, gradual step in the right direction. With this idea, the idea of emancipation, and I will take the credit. I was the only person who came up with this idea, so I'll take the credit for this. But I think this is a very logical, very reasonable um, answer for how to get back on the right track with this. So with this method, we can make sure the teens who, might claim that they're, capable and responsible of moving on to adulthood, we can actually test them and see if they really are or are not by giving them this government administered test that will test the individual on all aspects of adult life, right? And if the person who claims they're responsible enough for adult life, if they take the test and fail, guess what? They're not going to be able to move on yet, because they demonstrated by failing the test, even though they claim they're responsible and ready for adulthood, guess what? When you took the test, you got the answers wrong, so you still gotta, you're gonna have to wait a while. Now that doesn't mean the person, say in a year or two they can't come back and take the test again, because maybe they'll mature more by then, so then they can come back. Say if they take it first when they're 14, they mess up, get many wrong. No, they're not granted that ID. Right? Say if they come back 2 years later at 16, they do the test, and they pass it. Hey, then now they'll be granted that ID. But the 2 years before, when they took the test and failed, they'll be rejected, because they failed the test. So again, as I said, this is a very reasonable and logical step in the right direction. Is it perfect? No. But it's a step in the right direction to get more on track with how things were in the ancient world. And this, again, this would make this society, a much greater place, right? A much, uh, um, what those of us, that believe in the scriptures, we're really looking for the kingdom, to come and be established, but I'm simply like saying, since we're in the world, right, we have to, live here, abide, in the world. So while we're in the world, it doesn't hurt to, give some of these ideas, how to make this place a better place, even if it's, some of the very smallest, steps in the right direction. So, once again, I think that my idea is a very fair, very reasonable step in the right direction. With this concept, we're going to allow the teens who can demonstrate that they are ready to move on into adulthood. We're going to give them the chance. If they pass, hey, guess what? Welcome with open arms. You'll be given the idea of emancipation. Right now you're actually an adult. Right, you're no longer a child. Now you're an adult. You're going to be treated as an adult. You have the responsibility and the freedom as an adult. And as far as the teens who, are not ready, guess what? Those teens will, of course, still be, under the authority of their parents. Because say some of them took the test, they failed. Some of them claim that they're responsible, but when they took the test, they failed. So guess what? Even though you claimed you're responsible, hey, we saw, how you performed in the test. You didn't pass it. So now we know you still need, some more time. But as far as the teens who claim they're responsible and do pass the test, hey, well, guess what? That demonstrates to society they're not just saying, they're not just, little kids claiming that they're adults. No, look, they passed the test, proving that they are responsible enough and mature enough to take on adulthood. So society should welcome those humans with open arms into the adult part of society. Again, it just makes little sense to just come up with an idea and say, well, every human who is 17, that's not an adult. But magically, if they're 18, they are somehow now adults. Like, say, for an example, when I was 17, when I turned 18, I was sitting there doing a video. So when I started the video, it was 11:50 p.m. at night, right? And then the next day I would turn 18. So guess what? The video was like a half an hour long. So when I started the video, I was 17 years old. But when I ended the video, I was 18 years old. So again, going by the modern idea, if you're 17, you're a child. If you're 18, you're an adult. So I started off the video as a child, but then I ended the video as an adult, according to the American ideology. I mean, what logic does that make? That literally makes no logical sense in any way, shape, and form. But everybody, by the logic behind it, again, if you're 17, you're a child, 18, you're an adult, by the logic, when I started 17, when I ended 18. So I started my recording as a child, but then somehow within that recording time, I somehow magically changed from being irresponsible and immature to somehow being very responsible and being a adult. Somehow there was a magic change within the 30 minutes. It's like, wait a second, what? No, uh, real life doesn't work that way. That's just not how real life works. But again, if you believe the theory that if you're 17, you're not an adult, if you're 18, you are an adult, then again, by logic, you have to accept that I started the video as a child, but I ended the video as an adult because I started when I was 17 and ended when I was 18. Again, you have to believe that. Otherwise, you must admit that the theory is completely incorrect. Damn, we're going to literally just about an hour right here. Hey, time flies when you're having fun, as the old saying goes, man. And I am having fun, explaining this theory because truly, this idea that I put forward, this has the capability of changing the world for the better. Right? This truly has the capability of making the world into just slightly a better place. Because again, it's very reasonable, and many teens, and I speak from my own personal experience because hell, if I was given the opportunity, 15, 16, 17, to be, to move on into adulthood, hell, I would have done it in a heartbeat. But guess what? I was never given that opportunity. right? And again, this is what most of them want, right? Why? Because a lot of them act out many times. Why? It's not because they're, oh, there's something wrong with their brains. That's the that's the idea the drug companies, put out there. Like, let me give you an example. When I was 15, I got put in a mental institution. Why? Because I acted out against one of my parents when I got pissed off, because of how I was being treated. Right? I'm a 6 foot tall guy. I'm able to impregnate women, but here it is. I get treated like a little child, right? So I acted out. Was pissed off. I didn't, nothing physical. Just in words. You know what I'm saying? Hey, Ecclesiastes 7:7. Surely oppression makes a wise man mad. So should I have done that? No. But after a while, sometimes you can't help yourself, from acting out, from the oppression, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying I was in the right, but anyway, I had an argument with them, so I got put in the mental institution, and I even explained to them when I was in there, hey, look, all I want is my freedom, right? All I want is to, take on the adult responsibility, but at the same time be treated as an adult. I look like an adult, act like an adult. I'm able to have children. So by what logic am I now not an adult? It doesn't make any, it doesn't seem fair by how, a politician, by the stroke of a pen, they can claim, hey, look, even though you look like an adult, you act like an adult, in every way you are an adult, but by me signing my name on this piece of paper, with this decree, this law, I declare you're not an adult until you're this number. So no matter how, you know, um, no matter how mad you get, how upset you get, no matter what you do, nothing you do, we as a society will never accept you as an adult because you're not this arbitrary number. So again, it doesn't matter what you do, no matter what actions you take, no matter what type of responsibility you can do, we will not accept you as an adult because you're not this number. And again, that doesn't make any logical sense, and that truly damages people, man. That truly does damage people, man. You know, to take people who are responsible and are ready, to move on, and actually take responsibility for their own lives, to hold those people back literally for no reason at all, but just because they were not on earth a certain number of days or years. That's just certainly not logical or reasonable. So when I was in there, going back to the story, right, when I was in the institution, the solution they gave was, oh, well, we'll just put you on, some medications. It's like, no, I don't need no medications. I'm simply asking for my freedom, right? I want to be considered an adult. I want to, take on, the responsibility as an adult, but I want to have the freedom that comes along with that. That's all I need, right? That's all I'm asking for, right? Is that literally too much to ask for? So again, once again, going back to my statement, I myself, I'm not just, some random person who thought about this, a one Saturday night. No, I'm a person who actually lived through this. And when I was a young person, 14, 15 years old, I could demonstrate that I was responsible and capable of moving into adulthood at a young age. So again, it does deeply upset me, and I was depressed about it when I was that young. About, hey, look, I am responsible. I can do anything that I could, do anything that to demonstrate that I'm responsible. But no matter what I do, always get, back down, and would never be accepted. So, as I said, I speak from my own personal experience. I didn't just sit down, last Saturday and come up with this idea. No, that I've, from my own personal experience, came to these conclusions, when I was a teen as well. or so-called teen, because there's really no such thing as a teenager. If you do the research, the first time the word teenager was used was actually in the 1940s in a magazine, right? It was used in the 1940s in a magazine, and basically from that time on, it just became like a popular slang. Like, even if you look up why do we call people teens, they'll say we call uh, teenagers teens or teenagers because their age ends with the word teen, right? The number of their age ends with the word teen, so that's why we call those people teens. But you know what also gets me and doesn't make sense? Why is it that 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, they're considered to be adults, but 17 years olds and 13-year-olds and all those in between, those are teens, but 18-year-olds and 19 years olds, they're not teens, those are adults. It's like, but wait a second though. 18, 19, it has the word teen in it. So even going by the logic behind their statement, why are 18 and 19-year-olds, why are they adults? But, the people who are younger, why are they not adults then? It's like you get the point I'm getting at. They all have the word teen in the number of their age. So why are the 18 and 19-year-olds, why are they adults if they have the word teen in the number of their age? So again, just by going by logic, that makes no sense whatsoever. So I didn't want to make this video way too long. In fact, it might even cut out on me. Might even cut out on me in a few minutes. So just before it does, I want to say this real quick. If anybody made it to this part of the video, go ahead and put hashtag, um, let's see. Go ahead and put hashtag 2.0, right? Just a little shout out to Robert Epstein's book, Teen 2.0. If you made it to this part of the video, go ahead and put hashtag 2.0 if anybody made it this far through. Which a couple people will, but most won't. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to give, just some words on that. You can let me know down below if you have any feedback, any questions or, whatever you have, on the subject matter, you're welcome to share it down below. I hope this video was edifying and, gave you some, something new to think about. Because what I'm saying, this is what's the word I'm looking for? This is a very intriguing subject matter, right? A very, some might call it, it's like, well, why is it even important? Well, why is it important? Well, I think it's many reasons on why this is important. For one, this could help make the society a relatively better place. Why? Because these humans who, are viewed as some of the most troublesome, right, and troublemakers in the society. If we could, allow these humans, to actually have a chance to exit out of, the infantilization, of the teen, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, we'll say the teen world, for lack of better words, right, and everything that comes along with it. It's like if we give these people an opportunity to move on, a lot of them would take that, man. So it's just, would help make the world just a little bit of a better place. It would actually help ease some of the pain and the suffering that we see in, so-called teens, because these drug companies, they're making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars per year off of, antidepressants and, medications for teens. Or, as I like to call them, anti-psycho drugs. Side joke. But, yeah, not only them, the entertainment industries, the clothing industries, because again, the clothing industries, hell, with the concept of the teen, they have a whole new group of people that they can become rich off of. right? You can have, free classifications, of clothing, right? You have the kids' clothing, have the teen clothing, and have the adults' clothing, right? So that's free classifications of people that you can, sell merchandise to and have each, one of those clothings geared towards that group, right? So they're making a killing off of it. And then the entertainment industry, right? They're making a killing as well, right? The gaming industry, all of these industries put together, they're making an absolute killing off of the teenage myth, right? The myth of adolescence. This is hell. I would say this is if you include everything all together, this myth, right? What is the myth? The myth is, as I said, the teenage myth, right? The name of my book, right? No pun intended. But this myth, I'd easily argue and say if you were to take all of the organizations that are making some type of money off of it, if you were to add everything together, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars throughout the century that they're making off of this recently created, group in in human development. Okay, because there's no actual stage of development called adolescence. That was a development stage that was invented in the early 1900s. Again, by a man named G. Stanley Hall. Look him up on Wikipedia, and you can read about him. But I think that's going to be the video there. Maybe I'll come back and speak about it again. But I hope that was edifying. Once again, if anybody made it to the end, a hashtag 2.0, and that'll be the video. Again, you can let me know down below if you have any feedback, questions, or would like to add on to it. You're welcome to post down below.